everyone. I'm John,
Hello, I'm Sam.
and we're here to welcome you to the Artist Guest of Honor interview with our fantastic Artist Guest of Honor for Norwescon 47, Wayne Barlowe. Wayne, please come on up. So, even though many of you are probably fans and all know why Wayne is here, I'm going to go ahead and read his bio by way of information, just so we're all on the same page. Wayne Barlowe is a science fiction and fantasy author and artist who has created images for books, film, video games, and galleries, and written and illustrated a number of art books, including Expedition, Barlowe's Guide to Extraterrestrials, Barlowe's Guide to Fantasy, Barlowe's Inferno, Brushfire, The Alien Life of Wayne Barlowe, and An Alphabet of Dinosaurs. Expedition aired as the Discovery Channel special Alien Planet. A board game based on Expedition will be released in 2026. His video game concept work includes Dante's Inferno, Shadow of Mordor, and Shadow of War. His film designs can be seen in Blade 2, Galaxy Quest, Hellboy 1 and 2, Harry Potter 3 and 4, Avatar and Pacific Rim. He has written 2 novels, God's Demon and its sequel, The Heart of Hell, and is at work on the 3rd and final novel, Lucifer's Soul. His art book, Psychopomp, celebrating 30 years of his hell paintings and drawings, was published in 2021, and Psychopomp 2 is in the works as The Wildlife of Hell. Welcome, Wayne Barlowe. Everybody give it up for Wayne Barlowe. Sit, Wayne. So, before we get started with the questions with Wayne and Ernest, I just want to remind everybody, you've got your very own piece of Wayne Barlowe art hanging around your neck as your this year's convention badge, and I would be remiss if I didn't let everybody know just what a wonderful creature you have hanging around your neck. Their name is Daggerist from the Expedition series from the planet Darwin 4. Daggerist is a tree-dwelling predator who has flappy skin like a flying squirrel and can soar from tree to tree. That little thing on the bottom that looks like their lower jaw, it's actually a barbed tube. And when Daggerist catches up with you, and by the way, Daggerist has no eyes as we know them. They operate on sonic location. When Daggerist catches up with you, he pokes you with that thing that looks like a lower jaw, pumps you full of digestive fluids, and then sucks a delicious lunch back out. So that's an example of the wonderful creative mind of Wayne Barlowe. So thank you very much, Wayne. Could we get slide number 2 up on the screen, please? So Wayne was wonderful in working with Sam and me to put together a collection of images, both personal images of himself at various points in his life and career, paired with art images that are emblematic of that stage of his life and career. And we're going to work through the images and have Wayne comment on them. And we'll start with our first question that corresponds to the earliest image that Wayne sent us, which is, how early on in your life did you decide on your career, and what influenced your choice?
Well, first, thank you for showing up. I guess my childhood was really formed by the books that I was reading. My parents supplied me with a whole lot of science fiction paperbacks, and I was an avaricious reader. They were natural history illustrators, and that infused my love of science fiction. I sought out books that were about other worlds and other creatures on them, and for the longest time, I didn't actually think that I was going to go into science fiction or really travel down that road. I thought I was going to be an archaeologist or a paleontologist. That it seemed to me, I love history, so history has kind of layered its way into my thinking through everything that I've done subsequently, as has natural history. So the path towards science fiction was kind of a little circuitous for me as a young man. In terms of becoming an illustrator of that. Barlowe's Guide turned out to be a sort of fusion of what my parents did and what my love for science fiction was all about. So I would say probably when I was just about to get into college, into Cooper Union, I really made a decision to go down the path towards science fiction.
Excellent, thank you. Can we get slide 2 back up for just a second, and over to Sam for question number 2.
Yes, I have a question specifically about this sketches in Barlowe's Guide to Extraterrestrials that you just referenced. There is a beautiful section at the end of sketches and other works in progress, and we see mention of a character called Thype, and he seems to only exist in the back of that book, in that sketchbook, and just wondering, will we ever get to see more of this character in the world they inhabit? Because it is some beautiful images in there.
Well, first of all, he actually only exists in here.
Okay,
But
okay.
that's just for the moment. Thype was sort of getting my feet wet in terms of creating a narrative around an alien character. And he was actually developed while I was in college. I was in a school that was not really conducive to either narrative art or even realistic art. So he was a little bit of pushback to Cooper Union and their aesthetic at that time. And I did probably 8 or so paintings of him and a lot of drawings. Will we ever see him again? I'm kind of toying with it on the back burner, but to be honest, the things that I'm working on right now are kind of taking precedence. I just did a drawing of him, and it was very nostalgic for me. It's in the art show. I hadn't actually addressed him in a very long time.
I think it has been claimed already.
Uh-oh. Okay, that's a good thing to know. Yay. So he's kind of a little bit of an alter ego for me. I've kind of identified with him, feeling a little bit like a stranger in a strange land throughout my life, especially as a young man. He was somebody that I kind of imbued with some of the same sensibilities that I had. I have tinkered with a storyline with him. It's not where I want it to be. And so in a funny way, I like the idea of adding illustrations of him, putting him in settings, but letting the audience kind of put the story together a little bit on their own. And I do love the fact that people like him. You know, he's a funny character and not something that I want to push aside completely, to be honest. You know, I've actually thought that it would be a fantastic video game to have him in the world that I've created on the quest that I had originally sort of envisioned for him, which was, I just posted on Instagram a painting that I don't think I'd ever shown before of a deity figure creating the planets of the universe using a staff, a la kind of a wand, and the planets coming out of the top of that staff. So in my youthful mind, I came up with this notion that there was a sort of metaphysical floor of the universe where that staff was jabbed into and the creator dissipates and goes into another dimension, if you will. And so in order to affirm his notion of what creation was all about, he seeks that staff through endless journeys across this floor called Vaspar, and meets all the wild aliens that you see in the drawings in the back of Barlowe's Guide. That section actually, over the many decades since I did it, seems to be everybody's favorite part of Barlowe's Guide, the sketch section, which tells me maybe I should have just done a whole bunch of sketch sections and put them together, but...
I mean, I think it explains all the fondness for your original work.
Well, hopefully so.
Great. Moving along.
Okay.
Thanks, Wayne.
We have
So
so
we're
many
gonna-
questions.
Yeah, we're gonna move into a broader kind of question now. You've stated that the keys to your success are 1, to be original, 2, to not be self-derivative, and 3, to show flexibility in your career choices. Can you tell us how you've applied some of these principles in practice?
Yeah, and this comes from, I am sure this comes from some of the conversations I had with my dad, who I admire to this day. He was a beloved figure in the family, but he also could be very truthful in some of the ways that he approached my art as I was developing as a young man. And some of the things he would say would be, you know, where did you get that idea? Was it copied, or, you know, is it too close to this, too close to that? And that layered itself into my way of thinking in terms of, well, first as a child, trying to please your parent, and then later, you know, it imbued me with a sense of the originality you talked about, where I didn't want to be I didn't want anybody to look at my work and say, oh, that looks like so-and-so's work, or, you know, did you get that idea from so-and-so? And so, you know, from a psychological standpoint, it had its root as a child, but it's carried on through my life to this day, really. I believe in inspiration, but not emulation. It's great to be inspired. I am deeply inspired by 19th century painters, prehistoric art from the 40s, all kinds of, you know, disparate things that have layered their way into my art and my way of thinking. But I never, the worst thing somebody can say to me is, oh, that looks like so-and-so's work. You know, so that urge for originality came out of there. Career agility and flexibility, that's really, really important, especially in this day and age. I've been working as long as this convention's been around, actually, 47 years. And in that period of time, I've had to sort of reinvent myself and then go back and reinvent myself back to what I had done originally, and back and forth and to and fro. And because of that, I've managed to stay a functioning working artist in the face of enormous change in various sort of theaters of artwork. I mean, publishing is in no way does it look like it did back in the 80s when I first started. Artists are being paid for covers the same amount that they got paid in the 80s. There was it reached a pinnacle and then it dropped away. Doing original IP for publishers is problematic, especially when it comes to art books. A lot of publishers do not want to do art books anymore. My own agent doesn't want to sell art books, which has convinced me to do it on my own. The two Psychopomp books are being printed in China, and they're lovely. They look fantastic. They're not easy to get here. There's only one vendor, but still, it keeps my work in print. It allows me the flexibility to have more input than possibly a publisher would allow me to have. The same applies to having done film work. As of right now, probably everybody can guess by seeing what's in their theater. Post-COVID, Hollywood has fallen apart. I still struggle to figure out why Hollywood has fallen apart. You know, there's always an urge for people to go to the theater to see things that they haven't seen before, especially effects movies. But you know, it's a hydra in terms of why Hollywood is suffering the way it is. On the one hand, you have Marvel universe with its incredibly exorbitant budgets. If they don't succeed, then people are unhappy. Streaming has been threatening theater stuff. So in order to combat that, I thought, okay, you know what? It's time to go back to my roots a little bit. Not the paperback roots, thankfully, but the roots of doing my own books with my own narratives and that sort of thing. So that's what I'm doing with The Wildlife of Hell. And it's, I hate to admit, it's great fun, you know, having that reconnection with the old me. That book is ostensibly attempting to be Expedition in Hell. In fact, my wife and I kid her, and I call it Hexpedition, which I don't know that it really would be a great title, but it's kind of a fun synthesis. And what was the third thing that you had mentioned?
Oh, and to show flexibility was number 3, so you've covered all the core principles. So let's get slide number 3 back up for just a second, and then pass it back over to Sam for question number 4.
Yes. Having illustrated others' work and your own original ideas, lots of experience in both areas, do you find it more or less difficult to work without a prompt?
I would probably have to say that it's only slightly more difficult working for myself, because I'm a deeper critic of what I'm putting out there than what's written on the page. As an illustrator starting out doing paperback covers, I doted on the written word. I insisted for every cover that I did that I got the manuscript that I read from beginning to end, took notes, underlined everything, made sure that at the very least I would make an author happy, that I had ticked every box for what he or she or they were, you know, had in their mind. I had one incident that was a little bit off-putting to me. I did a whole series of covers for Keith Laumer's Retief books, And they were great. They were great fun. To me, it was James Bond in space. So I was doing slightly spoofy. In fact, the first one is the cover of the program guide here. I was doing all the due diligence, reading all these books, but I missed one enormously key thing, and it shattered me when the author got back to me. He said, "You got Retief's hair color wrong," and I'm like, Where on earth was that mentioned that I just missed it, you know? So those strictures were self-imposed in terms of publishing. I made sure that I was doing everything I could to fulfill that mission. But when it comes to my own work, again, that originality thing kicks in. And I sit back and I go, okay, whatever I'm creating here, I don't want to think that I've seen it somewhere else. So for all this wildlife and hell stuff, I'm doing everything I can to make sure that I'm not treading in any other footsteps. That one of the comments about Expedition way back when was that, well, they're like dinosaurs on another planet. And in a weird way, yeah, I see that, I get that. And I was tapping into mechanisms and anatomies and other, behaviorism and stuff like that from this planet. That was by intent. That was to show that we could have the same but different on another world. With hell, the bonds are slipped. Anything, within the framework of what I've created, the world that I've been developing, there isn't the same strictures imposed on me. And so that freedom is actually pretty difficult to contend with. Suddenly the gates are thrown wide open, and I'm just sort of, wow, the next painting of a creature, that could be anything at all that I want it to be, And I'm also trying with this book to not create creatures that are obvious as you would see in movies or TV shows. Oh, look, that looks like it came from hell because it's got teeth and dripping fangs and, all the stereotypical things that you would see in hell. I don't want that to be the case. I want this to look like a really fully realized biome or environment that created its own creatures within their own vernacular. So, again, to sum up, long-winded, satisfying myself, I think, is a bit harder than the strictures imposed by either a script for Hollywood or an author's work.
And now a question on that, as far as sort of the logistical process behind it, when you're working for somebody else, of course, there's someone giving you feedback that you're working for.
Right.
When it's your original work, do you have sort of people in place to be that third party giving feedback? Or, because I know when I've written stuff before, I'm like, I have no idea if anyone's going to like this. And of course, I don't ask somebody else. But do you have somebody to be the third party that's sort of judging the process?
Well, my lovely wife, who's sitting in the front row, is that person. She gets to see a lot of things that I am kicking out there, and she's wonderfully honest about it, and that's always a good thing, So yeah, I don't actually, I don't ask my kids. I don't. Occasionally, I'll throw a new piece at an artist friend of mine and see what the reaction is to that. And I listen carefully to what people say, and I either discard it out of pure ego and being annoying, or I listen to it and I say, okay, you know what, they're right, But it's infrequent that anybody has any kind of comment. They're probably too scared of me or whatever to, say, don't put that out there, or change this or change that. No, nobody really does that, Lucky me.
And actually, another question from working in the concept art world, is you talked about deliberately wanting to create creatures that are not what you would expect. How often, when you're working in sort of concept art, do people push back on your designs because they want something that is more expected? Or is someone coming to hire you specifically because they want that sort of unconventional idea that you would come up with?
It's mostly the latter, really. I become, once again, the 20-year-old guy who's working on paperback covers or with art directors when I'm working in the concept world for film. I get very dutiful. I realize there's a check at the end of the week. You know, it's a work-for-hire contract that I'm on. So I listen very carefully to what directors have to say to me. And yeah, they're hiring me because of the body of work that I've done. And I try to push the envelope as far as I can. Generally, in the past, when I've done character design, it's very, very rare that the very first thing that you put on the desk of a art director or director is going to fly. That did happen strangely with, in Avatar, there's the fan lizard. I don't know if you remember that it jumps off a branch. And I did one drawing and bingo, that was a wrap, which was fun. But generally, in the past, I've spent easily a week on a single character, and you know, in my humble opinion, frequently the very first design is the most original and most interesting to me, but directors have something in their mind that's not what's in my mind necessarily. And a lot of tweaking happens. For me, the process when I'm doing characters for a film is to never do two drawings that look too similar to one another. I've been in art studios in Hollywood where, and this makes my head explode, an artist will put 20 silhouettes on one piece of paper with the smallest tweaks, the smallest little changes from one to the next. And in one instance, and I won't mention the director's name, he walked up to the wall where everybody had tacked their work and he said, I can't look at this. I don't know what, you know, it's not making any sense in my head. Whereas if you do individual images and they're all significantly different, that's when a director can use your work as a palette, and he looks at the arms on one and he says, I like that, and the legs on another, and I like that. And it's a process, you know, and you go back to your desk and you say, okay, I'll combine these elements, I'll add whatever else he wanted in there, and eventually you get to the right place, hopefully, you know. But your ego goes right out the door on that. It's not, you know, you cannot walk into an art studio or embark on a film job and have some kind of overweening ego where you sit back and go, okay, I'm the artist. No, you're not. The director is the artist, using you as a tool, essentially. Yeah.
And speaking of creature design, can we move, what slide is?
Slide number 4, please.
Slide number 4, our next question is about Expedition.
So this is both Wayne from when he created Expedition as well as one of the lovely plates from Expedition. And the question is, Expedition is such an excellent example of visual art and writing working together to create a single narrative. What inspired the original concept? Did the art come first or the story?
Wow, that I think the concept, the overall concept, was an evolution out of Barlowe's guide. It, my urge to do my own world came from reading other people's, and I realized that there really hadn't been a fully realized world without intelligent life on it that approached science fiction in a way that was out of pure natural history. Now, I could be wrong. Somebody in the audience could raise their hand and say, oh, but wait a minute. But I wasn't aware of anything like that. So I think the original concept was what catalyzed me to do the original painting that I sold the book on the basis of. I sold that book on one painting and a 2-page outline of what I thought I wanted to do with it. And I took it to Peter Workman, and Workman at that time was flying very high with things like the Preppy Handbook and, you know, similar, almost spoof-like things. And to be frank, I think the publisher, who was a great guy, and I got along really well with him, but I wasn't really convinced that at the end of the day, he knew what I was driving at. I think in his mind, he may have thought, oh, this is kind of a spoof. You know, it's another world with weird creatures on it. He complained to me that he didn't really know how to market a science fiction book at the end of the day. On the other hand, it sold pretty well, and everybody, you know, did turn into a TV show and all of that, so he did well enough. But the foundational idea really was to create a world, and a world that nobody had seen before. And, you know, for that, I think it did its job.
And before I pass it back to Sam for question number 6, I will say there is an awesome board game that's in the works. Look up Arcus Games of New Zealand Expedition board game. According to their latest update, it's due out in 2026. Really looking forward to that.
I've actually watched playtesting on it, and it's really fun, and it looks really good. So I'm not a board game guy. I think I mentioned that to you. I'm a video game guy. Put me in Destiny 2, and I'm fine. Maybe not so much in PvP, but okay. This looked like something I would actually play. You've got little tiny plastic hover cones, you know, all that sort of thing. And the art, you know, I had to actually augment the art that was in the book with maybe 20 or so new pieces, done digitally, whereas the stuff in the original book was all done in acrylics. So that augments the whole thing, and I think people will enjoy it. It's not like any other board game that I've seen.
And an excellent segue back to Sam for question number 6.
Yes, the next question actually is about video games, because you have described yourself as a video games guy.
Yeah.
So, of course, what are your favorites? And then additionally, because I know you have some art credits in video games, would you talk about kind of what it's like working in that world, in that process? And
Yes. I've been playing video games forever. My dad had a PC. He was playing Steel Panthers on that, which was really old school, but great, a great hex game. I went from Apple to PC just because of that game, and then got some consoles, and bringing it up to date, I've been playing Destiny since the beta of Destiny 1. Almost exclusively, but then I did take a couple of diversions. Mech Warrior was an old favorite of mine on the PC, and so I've been playing a little bit of that. Titanfall, I played from beginning to end and thought it was possibly the best single standalone game, Titanfall 2 that is, that I'd ever played, and the PvP in it is super fun. It's just a great looking game, and I love mech, so you know I can't complain about that. On to the stuff that I've done, probably the best example was Dante's Inferno for EA. And in that capacity, I was essentially the art director on it. I don't get an art director's credit, but so much of what I put in, the environments and the characters and all the rest of that stuff, was pure me. And they were really nice about pretty much utilizing everything that I put into that game. I think at the end of the PlayStation version, if you finish the game, you get to look at a portfolio of all the art that I did in it, which is fun. And I had to announce it in Florence, which was a nice trip. How could I argue with that, you know? And so, yeah, I worked on Prototype a little bit, Shadow of Mordor and the sequel to that. There was a lot of my work in that. And my approach to it essentially is the same as the approach that I would take to film, you know, thinking in 3 dimensions, trying to get characters to look synchronous with the IP, but also original. Particularly in the Shadow of Mordor games, I'm a big Tolkien fan, and worked a little bit on The Hobbit in New Zealand when Guillermo was on it. And so it was a beloved property for me, and I threw myself into that as well, very happily. So.
Excellent. Let's go to slide 5, please. And this, of course, is a picture of Wayne from the time that he was doing concept art for Avatar. The creature, of course, very recognizable to all the fans of the film. And even though you weren't involved in screenplay on that particular work, here's the question. Along with your extensive career in the visual arts, you also have notable experience writing novels and some screenplay work. What is it like creating a workflow in a completely different medium, and what are the pros and cons of each process?
Not a big question at all. It's every project I've worked on of my own has had a different template, a different feel to it. When I wrote God's Demon, which arguably, even to this day, was probably the hardest thing I've ever done, it was untried, untrammeled territory. I didn't really feel like I was confident until I was about halfway through the writing, and then I started to feel like, well, this is sort of working, and I kind of get it. Books like Expedition and the Wildlife of Hell, I don't actually have an outline for that. It's in my head. And I'm proceeding as a narrative in the same way that I would read a Richard Francis Burton book on traveling to Arabia or something like that. I'm channeling something that's inside of me that's propelling me forward. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't go back into the manuscript, which I've done a million times, to tweak things, to make things consistent. But in those cases, the writing informs the art, and the art informs the writing. It's very much a one hand washing the other process. As I'm writing, something may come up where I think, oh, you know, I really need the ground in hell to open up in a certain way. So let's think about what that would look like visually. And then I'll happily move to the couch and my iPad and say, let's start playing with that. Doing the art for something like that is wonderfully distracting because the writing is super hard. So I'm finding myself creating more art at the moment than writing, and having to say, okay, you better put the brakes on because you're getting ahead of yourself when it comes to the writing. And at the moment, my deadline on it is May of next year, so I really need to do more writing than artwork. When it comes to other kinds of books, Barlowe's guide was very proscribed. It was, you know, understandably 50 aliens. A co-author and I went through hundreds of characters to get to that point. But there was no question about how that book should be done. Every morning I would sit down at my drawing table and I would sketch in pencil on a piece of board, and by the end of the day I had a finished painting. So that, I probably couldn't do that today, but that, unless I was working digitally, but that was the thing. But the workflow is different for each thing. It seems, for me, tailoring it to the material is the best way that I can move forward on it. And if I'm writing, I'm writing the third book, there is a pretty detailed outline for that. I would not dream of attempting that without an outline. But a book that's art heavy or equal parts art and writing, I feel like I have enough experience that I can pull it off the way I described.
And before we move on to any other questions, I want to make sure we get through the wonderful selection of images that you sent us. So can we get slide 6 up on the screen, please? So, of course, you mentioned your trip to Florence when you first presented Inferno, and there's a lovely concept sketch. Next slide, please. And this, of course, is some more work on Inferno, if I'm not mistaken. And there's the artist in his studio working on the very plate that you're looking at on the screen here. Next slide, please.
If I might correct you on that, that painting that you just alluded to was, those are manticores. I have some back burner projects, and that's for a back burner project called Crypto Zoo.
Excellent, thank you. And this, of course, is from Wayne's work on Pacific Rim with Shovel Nose, the iconic first character from the scene in the movie. And then, now, Sam and I were wondering that reddish painting to the left, is that another concept for a kaiju of some kind?
Yeah, well, there's a dual purpose to that piece, okay? One was to get another painting on Guillermo's wall in his house, and the other was to do an elaborate rendering of a character that was not actually going, in the final cut of the, excuse me, of the movie. He had developed, I probably shouldn't talk about it, but he developed another large scene that we were going to see in Pac Rim. And in order to flesh it out, he asked me, after I designed that character, to put it in a large painting. And for me, the last thing in the world that I want to do is perform in front of a studio full of really talented artists, and let alone perform with traditional paint while they're all sculpting in ZBrush and doing digital work. And in this case, we were in the man cave, and he took me to an art store, and we bought art materials, and suddenly I'm standing there, you know, like some sort of artist, painting where, I mean, it was the last thing in the world that I expected I'd be doing on the show. So when I finished the knife head painting, he wanted the other one, and that was a couple of weeks worth of nervous making work, but it all came out well.
Great, and can we get the slide that follows the one we just showed, please? So this is Wayne in his studio today. I'm loving the Chalamet as Muad'Dib with Chris knife out. Figure I'm glad you definitely included that in the photo. And the next slide, please. So this is perhaps a sample of some of your more recent work, yes?
Yes.
Could you favor the audience with a few words about where this is coming from?
Yeah, this is one of the opening paintings from the Wildlife of Hell book. And this represents the main character who has the circular sigil over him. And that is Eligor, who was the narrator of the first book, God's Demon. He has been sent in book 3, and this is not that much of a revelation, on an expedition to make contact with the salamandrines in the far distant wastes. But along the way, because he's kind of science bent, he is going to be the narrator for the Wildlife of Hell and tell everybody what he discovers along the way. So this is his expedition of a number of other demons minor, and that's the artist off to the right, namely me, on a smaller creature. And there's a salamandrine guide in the foreground here, and then a few summoned demons. And this was a digital piece that I did on the iPad.
Excellent, thank you. And I think this is a great segue back to Sam for question number 8.
I had just a quick question on your process, because I know you did move to digital. Do you do exclusively digital, like Procreate paintings now, or
Yeah.
do you also still work in traditional?
No, it breaks my heart to say this, actually, but it's probably been close to 5 years since I've lifted up an actual paintbrush. The digital work, I know that it probably displeases some. There are qualities to both media that are hugely valid. For me, I love the feel of paint coming off a brush, and I love the, oh God, I'm going to say it, the happy little accidents that happen when the brush does things on your palette and grabs a little wrong color and you put it on there and it looks fantastic. I love brush strokes. I even like the almost non-existent smell of acrylics. All of that I did for 30 years or more, and it was how I lived. That said, I didn't find a digital program that suited me until Procreate came along, and I bought an iPad. My chief complaint was that I didn't feel that the hand of the artist really was visible in digital work in Photoshop, at least not for me. Painter came close. I did some work in Painter early on, and they had some algorithms that actually did seem to simulate brush bristles and that sort of thing. And so my very first digital sketch was a Procreate one. I'm sorry, a Painter one. But I felt too constrained by working with a tablet, and it just didn't feel as natural. And then Procreate came along, and I'm happy to say that a lot of people have said, wow, I didn't realize that wasn't acrylics. It looks so much like your normal work that I can't really tell. Now, the benefits, of course, to working digitally with a program like Procreate is as soon as you finish it, well, first of all, you work on layers, and there are many ways to explore different approaches in a piece that you can discard or merge. At the end of a piece, you can send it to somebody immediately. You don't have to have it scanned at great expense and discomfort. There are too many good reasons to not go back. At the moment, I don't consider myself a gallery painter. I've always felt that working for galleries becomes its own means, and I'm not happy with the idea of sort of replicating the same images over and over again for clientele and all the rest of that. It becomes too commercial for me. I like pieces that I do, every one of them, to be different than the one that I've done before. So doing live art, for me, doesn't make that much sense anymore. It's a storage issue, it's a scanning issue, it's just got too many strings attached. And so Procreate fills the void. And I think also for me, I like the idea that I can come up with an idea almost every day and create it in 2 days, move on to a new idea and a new idea beyond that. And if I was doing work on an easel, it would take me a couple of weeks at least to do a painting. And my output, I don't like to sound clinical about it, but Psychopomp 1 and 2, I couldn't have done either of those books in the last 3 years. The Psychopomp 2 has upwards of 90 new images, and those are things that I've done in the last 2 years. I could never have done that with paint, you know. So those are the arguments that I put forth about it, you know, and I look at the paintings that I've done in the past, and yes, they're from the past, and my heart aches a little bit because I miss it. But, you know, I think being more productive at this point in my life means more.
Well, Sam, we've got about 13 minutes left in the hour. What do you say we open it up for some audience?
Yeah. I have no explanation for that. I was the executive producer on that. I did shepherd much of the 3D, but that was not at that, you know, I had a limited amount of power, to be honest. That show was a strange manifestation of the book. It was original, in my mind, it was meant to be a sort of Richard Attenborough journey, following a migratory herd across Darwin 4, encountering predators, other creatures. We'd had you know, encounters. And that flew for a little while. The producer was John Copeland. He was great. He produced Babylon 5, and he and I spoke the same language. It was really terrific. However, Discovery Channel at that juncture was going through massive transformations in terms of their upper hierarchy. And so they, the show went through many thought process iterations, not the least of and most annoying of which was, yeah, we should do this show, but we'll just have a bunch of scientists sitting around a table talking about it. And I'm like, okay, that's not even close to what I had in mind. So this was meant to be a hybrid of it. And say what you will, I mean, I wish the CG was today's quality CG. But, you know, I was more or less pleased with the show when we got done with it. But again, I didn't have as much power as I might have liked, you know, to impose my will.
We have more questions. I also can't see off to the side.
If there was an era in Earth's history you would like to visit the way the main character in Expedition did for Darwin 4, which one would you pick? There's just one.
No, I've got to see dinosaurs. Are you kidding? You know, yeah, I mean, that's not even, let's say, I don't know about the late Cretaceous, but I would, the Jurassic would probably be, I have to see Ceratosaurus running around, you know, hands down. Also, a second runner-up would be, excuse me, the Cambrian explosion. I would love to see that too, you know. I want to see that Anomalocaris, you know, in all of its bestial glory, you know. Yeah, exactly.
Hi. You've done a lot of work with Guillermo del Toro. I was just wondering if you could comment on what impact Guillermo's work has had on you and what impact you think your work has had on Guillermo.
Oh boy. There was we had a very good working relationship. There was a great deal of mutual admiration. He knew what I was good for, and it was not my jurisdiction to know what he was good for. You know, that's on the screen, and it all looks great. He had a tendency. We would walk in the first day, and he would assign everybody their various components of the film, you know, creatures, sets, whatever. And he trusted me enough, really, to give me my head on things. And he of all the directors I've worked with, being as visual as he was, he had a fantastic handle on what he wanted. And we spoke the same language, which was terrific. More than that, I'm not sure I could really say. You know, I don't believe that my influence was terribly important in regards to the shows that I worked on with him. Again, the director's the boss. He's got the vision, and you become the tool. You know, so my style, my visual sensibility, all of those things, I think, were synchronous with what he wanted. The minute you diverge from that, you don't get paid. You know, off the show. So, you know, it's important to make some kind of link. If you're working with a director, hopefully you make a link where you start to speak the same language.
Any more questions? Joe, you got anyone for us? Oh, here's a hand.
As a traditional artist, how traumatic was it transitioning to digital? Like, did you have to take courses or have anybody show you anything, or did you just kind of start working with it?
I think that Procreate is probably the most intuitive program I've ever picked up. I picked it up inside of, I did one sketch that set me on my course, and it was immediate. It's just one of the, you know, I think the Apple Pencil is genius. I think the iPad is fantastic. I'm not selling them, but I can just sort of say that these are two tools that can't be beat, really. And I felt an immediate convergence with my style and my way of drawing, and all of these things combining in Procreate to immediate effect. As I said, with a Painter, it was a little bit more difficult, keyboard stuff and Wacom tablets and all that. But I'm at the moment, as I said, I really miss painting traditionally, but I'm also very happy working on the iPad. So I make no complaints, and I do think anybody who feels, you know, that has an iPad that feels that they can give it a whirl, do it. It's a fantastic app. Sure.
We got time for one more quick one.
And if you don't have questions, I do have one more that I am very curious about. It's all me. My last question, do you remember the first imaginary creature you ever designed? And can you tell us about it?
Yes, I'm trying to remember its name. I was a small child, and I was trying to impress my parents. And I think, okay, this is going to be ridiculous. I think it was called a grimpus, okay? And it was a four-legged thing with two bulbous eyes, and it walked on sort of sloth-like forearms, okay? And it was green. And there you have it. Aren't you
sounds
glad you
beautiful.
asked?
It sounds like it would fit somewhere in the wildlife of hell.
You know, don't tempt me.
Well, thank you so much, Wayne. Can we get the final slide up on the screen, please?
Yes, last one.
So just so you know, all things Wayne Barlowe are to be found at waynebarlow.com and on Instagram at WayneBarlow_the darkness. Give it up for Wayne Barlowe, everyone. Wayne, thank you so much.
Thank you,
It's been a
John, and
pleasure.
thank you,
Thank
Sam.
you.
Wonderful questions, and thank all of you for wanting to see what kind of answers I come up with.
And thank our great tech people.
Yes, thanks
Yes.
to the tech team. Listen,
Thank you.
we're putting this man to work on Sunday at 11 o'clock back in this room, a 1-hour deep dive retrospective and introspective into Wayne's work. You're not going to want to miss it if you're a fan of Wayne's art, and there's several other panels. Use your guidebook app. Wayne Barlowe in the guidebook app, everyone. Thank you.
You will never see more images in 1 hour.